So nice to speak to you guys again.
Lovely to
Likewise,
speak to you.
likewise.
So, same time of year, different film.
Yes.
Different film, yeah. It's
So, I mean, huge congratulations on everything with An Irish Goodbye. I was sort of watching it like, this is amazing. You guys were just like, win, win, win.
It
it
was
was a bit daft. It was a bit daft, yeah. It sort of it took on a little life of its own, kind of gained this momentum, and it started to kind of run away from us, and we were just kind of playing catch up the whole time. But I don't know. I think that made it really charming in a way that we sort of were so green to it and so like we. It's funny looking back now, like because we've been very fortunate to become Academy members this year. So
Yeah.
now we sort of like see all these emails come through, like the campaign stuff, and we were just laughing, saying like we just did none of that with An Irish Goodbye. We were so like clueless about it all, so green to it, and we just got very lucky that the film kind of found its own kind of way, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did it feel coming into a new film? And, we're here to talk about the Golden West. How was that intimidating after the huge success of An Irish Goodbye?
It wasn't because we made it before really all of the madness kind of kicked off. We were filming that in the beginning of December, end of November, beginning of December. So that was before any of the shortlists or anything like that had even been released. And we were working on the Golden West for pretty much all of 2022 in terms of we wrote it very early on in that year, and then it took a long time to get the sort of the finance together as happens with short films. So we were kind of our heads were sort of buried in the Golden West for pretty much that whole year. And An
Yeah.
Irish Goodbye was off doing its thing on the film festival circuit, and we were kind of keeping an eye on it. And then very late in the day, it had this like massive final sort of third, second, fourth wind kind of thing that obviously it kind of, as Ross said, it sort of ran away from us. So really with the Golden West, we it was quite nice because we were approaching it without knowing what was to come, and it meant we were just very much focused on it in and of itself. Ross and I didn't go to film school, and when we started making films together, we said we would try and do 3 in 3 years, and we would start small and scale up, and the idea being that each one would kind of grow in its ambition and how it was sort of challenging us as filmmakers. And the Golden West was supposed to be the kind of culmination of that. And so, the fact that we were shooting on film for the first time and shooting, working with animals, and we had guns, and it's a westerny shootout in the middle of the mountains in Snowdonia. Like we definitely kind of made it as difficult as we could within the short film form. But no, yeah, we were really chuffed to be able to give ourselves that challenge, and so thankful for it, for the crews that come with you on these crazy journeys, and join your passion in trying to bring it to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what I've loved, because I've seen, so it's Roy, An Irish Goodbye, and then Golden West. You guys have a propensity for the dark comedy.
Yeah, we sort of can't avoid it, to be honest. I don't know. I feel like there's something about that that speaks to us, and I suppose each of those three films is kind of on a different part of the scale of black comedy, and maybe moving darker as we go. But I don't know. I think for us, like the kind of the tragic comedy thing feels very truthful, and it feels very. So I don't think it's something we're almost like that aware of. It's just how we interact with one another, and our kind of back and forth dynamic as friends is quite comedy, jokes with each other. So I think that always sneaks its way in, even when we are doing a Western psychological
Yeah.
thriller kind of thing as well.
So I think one of my favorite things about the Golden West was that they were sisters.
Mm.
Because I mean, normally I think when you're watching something from that era, from the gold rush and all of that, you'd expect to see male figures. But we've got these really two quirky, amazing women. Why did you decide to write it that way?
They were sisters from the get-go, really. We didn't kind of envisage it as if it was the male sort of version of that story. I think we, me and Ross are both very much interested in our history and really interested in these two periods of time. The emigration story and the story of the Great Hunger in Ireland, and finding out that kind of crossed over with the gold rush, which we were also simultaneously really interested in these two kind of like global phenomena that were happening at the same time. And then added on to that, as is the case with history, the sort of the male stories are well documented largely. If they are stories documented, they're always of the male perspective, and sadly, there are all of these fascinating, interesting stories from the female perspective that just aren't really recorded in history, and so it was a bit of an exercise really for us in terms of like dreaming up these two characters that could have existed. And lots of women did go out and join the gold rush, and of course a million people fled Ireland during the famine, and so it was just us imagining a little pocket of what might have been in when these two kind of worlds collided. And it was really interesting I think we're quite drawn to sort of unlikely protagonists and subverting within our protagonists as well, and they were the most fun characters to write, and I think there was something like, I think about like whatever happened to Baby Jane, and that kind of sisterly relationship, and the kind of embittered sisterly relationship was just like you don't really expect your kind of to see them descend into this madness and this feud, but that made it all the more fun to write.
Yeah, there's like a brutality kind of there at the heart of it, that felt really interesting, kind of against the grain of what we'd like often seen in like sisterhood portrayal, and I think you're always looking for something that feels like a fresh kind of perspective of that story, and just in the kind of the context that we find the characters, it didn't feel like we were trying to put it on top. It felt so natural that you would be so desperate. It's such a desperate situation, fleeing this famine where you've gone from absolutely nothing to trying to then not just survive but thrive and like find your wealth in finding gold. There's just something for me that's always like the thought of like gold miners and looking for gold feels so, I guess that's why there's so many films about it, so many stories about it, because it's so story like in its essence as a thing. Like you're literally doing like a mission, you're on an objective, you're looking for this piece of gold at the end of it. So like, all of the kind of classic spaghetti westerns and stuff found their way in with a bit of an influence, and the kind of that kind of made its way into.
I mean, it's brilliant because, like you said, so many of those stories you see, and they're male dominated, and I love those kind of stories and spaghetti westerns, and I love them all. So for me to see these two, women on screen, and also, I've got a sister as well, and I could see so much of it. I think it's really relatable, even in its bizarre nature.
Yeah.
So,
Well, sorry, no, you go.
go on.
No, I was just going to say we've both got sisters, and I was just thinking when you were saying that what they are thinking about us writing this film, but that's for another conversation with them.
Yeah, fair. You need to broach that. So you mentioned earlier you were shooting in Snowdonia. I mean, how did it work? How big was your team? What equipment did you have? Were you trekking over mountains? Because it seems totally desolate, where you shot it.
Desolate's the word. Desolate is absolutely the headline word. Yeah, it was just so intense, that it was just like tiny little team. We must have had like 20 people maybe with us, Tom, on set. Like just had to be nimble. Like you're in and amongst the mountains. The weather, we shot in November, December time, as Tom said. So like the weather was just brutal. Like, I mean, it either rained the whole time, it was like frosty, it was just up, it was so windy, it was just everything. There was, on our last day, our final shot, there was like a massive kind of hailstorm that was going on around us, and it was the one time we needed to do the scene with the matches. So we had the whole crew huddling around our two actors while we were trying to light match. It was just, but that's the joy of short films as well. You don't have these kind of like big opportunities to say, well, the weather's bad, we'll do this another day, because there just aren't the days. So yeah, it was pretty rough and ready. It was, we stretched the budget and everybody's sort of capacity to like the absolute nth degree, but I think everybody's really like proud of it now and proud of how much we managed to get out of quite a small budget and a small team.
I mean, that shines through. It looks brilliant because, yeah, it does. It really, you get that feeling that they're in the middle of nowhere and there is no one there, apart from the odd little guy who comes along on his boat. And I'm still not sure what I think about him, whether he's real or not.
This is the question we get asked the most, really, of all of them.
Okay, fair.
What side do you think you're coming down on that on?
Yeah, I don't think he's real.
We were speaking about at the start of the film, this boatman character is almost like it feels like he is a figment of Fanula's imagination, and then by the end of the film, when you leave him in that final scene, it's almost as if maybe they could have been a figment of his imagination, and that's quite an interesting sort of purgatory to leave it in, where we don't have to decide or tell people either way.
No, fair. Keep the mystery.
It's a great cop-out answer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is great.
So let's talk about our two leads. I mean, both women who I've seen. I remember watching the Magdalene sisters years ago.
Yeah.
And just their chemistry, their bounce off with each other. It's just amazing. So what was your casting process?
They bizarrely never worked together, which is quite bizarre for the Irish industry because most people just tend to have had an experience with each other. But yeah, they're both absolutely brilliant. We love working with actors with a kind of grounding in theatre, and they both have done loads and loads of theatre. And especially because we were shooting this on 35mm film stock, we had, we didn't have take after take after take. We knew we needed people to come in, rehearse with us for like 2 days, and then just be kind of ready to go. So yeah, they're both. I mean, I think they're both just a miraculous kind of pair. What they've managed in this is so. With a period piece, you've got to try and give it that weight and that lived-in kind of quality. And I don't know, people speak about faces that look like they've seen an iPhone and stuff before. It's just like they both just have this gravitas and this kind of like, and they both really like took time to look into the history and stuff, and like really ground themselves in it. And I think the performance that they gave and the kind of chemistry that you mentioned that they kind of managed is so much down to the work that they put in with us in rehearsal, before the shoot even. Tom, sorry, do you want to add anything?
No, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. They were joy to work with. But yeah, that as Ross says, we really are drawn to people that got that grounding in theatre, and shooting on film is very much like theatre. You've not got your ability to go again and again and again. So there was a lot of emphasis put on that kind of live performance element of it when we were going to go for a take, and so I think that's where the both of them having that grounding of being on the stage really played into our hands really as directors.
So then shooting on film, always a challenge. Why was that decision made?
Yeah, I mean, we said from the get-go, really, with the period quality of the film and trying to capture the sort of the grit of these landscapes and of the characters and the situation that they're in. We've seen many films that have done a kind of film emulation thing exceptionally well, and that and we could definitely have gone down that route, but I think just trying to stay as true to that form as possible, and also for us as filmmakers, like it felt like if there was ever a project for us to get to explore what it is like to shoot on film, this was the one to do it on. And so it was kind of the sort of, not like the non-negotiable element. Sounds like we're kind of throwing toys out of the pram, but we kind of just said, if we can do everything we can do to shoot this on film, that would be the ideal. And if we can't, maybe we should do another project instead. And so we were really thankful to get the sort of the likes of Kodak and Panavision, who are so supportive of emerging filmmakers who want to shoot in that format, and it heavily discount film stock for you and things and processing costs and whatnot. So when we worked out that it was going to be like financially viable, we thought great. And then we had to work out exactly like the practicality of how much do you need, like how much do you back yourself to get what you need, because you can't get any more once you're up the mountains in Snowdonia. You are stuck with the roles that you're stuck with. And so we did a lot of maths and a lot of working out what ratio we thought we'd shoot it against. I think we pretty much nailed it, because we came back with one roll of film, which was actually, we didn't know it existed. Our co-producer Jamie sort of hid this roll of film away from us and pretended that we'd run out. It was a safety backup, which was very clever of him, because we would have definitely used it otherwise. But Ebba Holt, who's our like amazing cinematographer on this, like one of the key reasons that we wanted to work with Ebba was that she had worked so amazingly on film before and really sort of guided us through that process. And the fact that she shot this whole film pretty much entirely, at least 98% in natural light, with no time, a very, very tiny camera crew to work everything out. It's, when I look back at it now and I see it on the cinema screen, it's fantastic. And even like, our focus puller Rob Stanton, like, I don't think there was one shot when we got to the rushes that was out of focus. And the fact that these people can pull out that kind of work under those conditions is amazing.
Yeah. What do you feel that you both learned from it in the process with working on film?
It's a very good question. I think we've always been quite prep heavy and quite sort of intense on like storyboards and going into it. Maybe it's because there's two of us and there's kind of two brains working together on that, doing more prep. But I think it's also just, our kind of process. But with film stock, it's just, I can't imagine just going and freewheeling it. With film stock, I think it makes it a non-negotiable to sort of at least have your ideas in place and your kind of plan. And then you can go and you can find things on the day, like whenever, but you sort of, I guess it just gives you that limitation a bit more. And I think sometimes that sounds like a negative thing, but actually what we've found in our kind of process is the kind of more limitation you've got, the more creative it forces you to be, and the more kind of the solutions you end up coming up with tend to be that bit better, because it makes you a little bit sharper sort of across the process. So I think, constantly being on your toes, you get there, the weather's wrong, you've not got enough film stock, whatever it is, you maybe have like 6 shots in your storyboard plan, your first AD and your DPR, and you can do 3. It sort of just like sharpens your storytelling focus to like really economize the way you tell a story. So, there's lots of parts of this film where we had these grand kind of ideas of, we'll get a crane, we'll swing down here, we'll have all this, and actually the practicality of it meant we couldn't do that. But actually, I think that it gives the film this quite grounded aesthetic with the characters that I think, and a kind of subjective kind of feel that is quite important for this film.
Yeah, I felt the dirt. I felt like, their skirts all messed up with things, and when she's tied up to the tree, and you can feel all that sort of nastiness, and you're glad you're at home with your nice hot water bottle when you're watching it. Yeah, and that's definitely, I think, through the film thing. Was there anything that you wanted to capture that you weren't able to, and then that struggled moving into the edit?
There's always things like that. I think, we were trying to be so greedy with just like, I think what we would kind of learn from our previous films was just trying to get more kind of sort of interesting coverage, and we, as Ross said, we did a lot of storyboarding, and we done I suppose what in retrospect has kind of come under the brackets of maybe like luxurious sort of mid-scene shots, or like those classic sort of like hip shots from the westerns, and you're sort of tracking. There's a scene where one of the characters is actually, it's a spoiler, I can't really say it, but they're kind of tracking from one thing onto to the other, and we would have, there's kind of always these little sort of additional kind of shots that you can get this, you get the bare bones of what you want to get from the scene, and then sometimes you can't get things, and I think what we were good at, though, and this is, we as like everybody, the collective, was we always kind of made sure that we had enough to cut good versions of the scenes, and then that was done first, and then we would embellish with things after that. And so sometimes when the logistics of weather and things kind of come into play, you can't get everything that you want, but as Ross said, that forces a new kind of creativity. We wanted the boatman to be rowing a lot more than he was. I think there's a scene where the boatman is singing when you first meet him, and originally he's supposed to be like rowing up the river and singing, and they have this sort of looking at each other scene as he's moving. And then we got into that lake, which I think is supposed to be the coldest lake in Europe. And just from a health and safety point of view, it was like, no, we're not going to let him.
There was a storm that day. That's what it was. We were meant to do it. And there was a storm and I was like, well, let's not put the guy in the boat then, just because we can, capsize him.
Put him on the bank.
Put him on the bank.
Oh, you're very kind.
Yeah, I know. Much to our actor Shawnee fans' relief, I think, on the day. Yeah.
So, I mean, now you guys are in the trenches writing the feature.
Right.
What are you bringing from these 3 shorts that you set out to make? What have you learned, and what's going into the feature?
Oh my goodness! I mean, in terms of what we've learned, so much. I think back to like the first short we made, Roy, which was like our first time ever behind the camera. It like from that to this has been such a journey. But I think like the kind of sensibility of our work will continue to, I guess, like evolve and develop. But I think the heart of it is sort of stayed roughly the same, and I think that will come with us. I hope. But I think that like the technical side of things, and even just like the areas of interest and the kind of like where that has developed and where it continues to develop, that's like a really exciting thing for us. So like the kind of stories we love, as Tom said, are the tend to be at least these kind of like unlikely protagonists, and typically in the middle of nowhere in these kind of like rural hinterlands. So we just find ourselves drawn to these kind of landscape character study kind of pieces. So I'd say that will continue. In terms of the actual feature itself, I'm gonna pass the buck on to you, Tom. Go for it.
Oh gosh, I mean, our feuding siblings theme continues, which probably says more about me and Ross in a duo than anything else. And so that's kind of continuing as a theme here. And as Ross said, all of those kind of like key sensibilities in terms of location. The feature that we're writing at the moment, I think, is hopefully is kind of a molding of genre, and slightly pushing and subverting what we're trying to kind of put into this Venn diagram of a few different things. So it's a bit of a mix of a sort of cabin fever type psychological thriller film over here, keeping that grounded sort of family drama thing, and then with a nice kind of storybook black comedy quality that I think, when a lot of our sort of the Coen brothers, Tarantino, Martin McDonagh influences on us is kind of filtering through into that through osmosis. So watch the space. But we're, as you say, we're right in the trenches at the moment, and it's nice to be back writing again. It's definitely nice to be writing in the long form. It's exciting. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you again. It's so nice speaking to you sort of again and seeing the progress in your work and in everything. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you.
When we spoke to you last, Sarah, we were in the edit for this film. We were speaking about Dubai. We were in a little side room of our editing suite for this film. I totally just remembered as you said that. So that is a fun little full circle moment.
There we go. I love those kind of moments.
Nice.
All right, guys, we're back to your writing trenches.
We will.
Good to chat to you, Sarah. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.